Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for the Beaufort Digital Corridors Lunch and Learn. We have a great panelist of experts in a variety of different digital media expertise and background. I'm going to give it over to them for each one of them to introduce themselves. We'll start at Andy at the end and go right down the line. So just give a brief introduction. Jason Loia is going to be our moderator. He'll be asking questions throughout, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
Okay, first and foremost, it is quite my pleasure to be a part of this discussion about, well, how artificial intelligence impacts and connects with my mixed reality media artworks, projects, and events and so forth. I guess for the most part, I can only say that I use AI mostly as a query or enhancement and research tool, basically, to monitor projects, to monitor, analyze trends, to gather information, and to make decisions about the likely outcome of certain projects that I'm working on so that I don't waste resources and times. So basically, that's it for the most part. I'll just close by simply saying is that I've been around for a while before technology was invented. I started 56 years ago, shortly after high school, shortly after getting out of the Air Force, actually. So basically, I've evolved with the industry before it was an industry, before it was even taught as formal courses in schools, and worked with many organizations, mostly in the world of global finance technology with some major firms, major global firms. I'm not going to go through the list because there was a bunch of them. We were jumping around a lot back in the day. So there you have it.
Thank you, Andy. My name's Jason Loia. I'm a 20-year startup tech guy from Silicon Valley. I moved here a couple of years ago. I have a small consulting firm and game studio down here in the BDC, downstairs. I will say, similar to what Andy said, I've seen a lot of technological revolutions in my 20-year career, and I think we're on the precipice of something that it amounts to basically the App Store that came out about 2000, 2009. It really was a game changer. I don't know about the ethics of it. I don't know about the impacts, good or bad. We'll talk about this with this panel today. Thanks.
I'm Jim Sidletsky. I'm coming to you from USC Beaufort down the street. I basically teach animation, games, and art coming from the studio art department. Prior to this, I was basically doing work for EA and consulting for EA Sports, creating football players, and then before that I was doing graphic design for 7 years. So it's like I do have my expertise as far as is mostly teaching students, but that's basically what I do.
Hi, I'm Tatiana. I am Jim's student from USCB. I'm an emerging early career artist, and I'm very enthusiastic about AI. I use them since as early as 2016 when just style gun models appeared. And I believe that AI is a means of production for artists, not just a prototyping or ideation tool. And it makes a lot of different mediums very accessible to so many different artists. My whole belief is that AI is here to make synthetic media like video games or animation that are usually done by large studios and large groups of people and are so expensive in production can now be done by small crews or individual creators. Thank you.
Hey Tim, your turn.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim Kaminski. I'm an art director. I've got my master's degree from SCAD, so I used to be down over in that area, but right now I'm over in LA, working right now on robot entertainment in a game studio. I've also worked in animation and games. Formerly, I was over at Wonderstorm working on the Dragon Prince TV show and the game side. The game was just announced recently. I've been art directing for about 10 years, and I've been in the industry, digital media and whatnot, for probably about 20 years, doing everything from 3D animation, 3D modeling, pixel art, digital painting, rigging, kind of the whole gambit of what goes on in games, a little bit of programming as well. And in the past, I've made my own games from scratch, and with like a development studio like me and one other artist or one other engineer. And I've toyed around with AI a good bit and kind of look at it as having possibilities for being good tools, but in its current form, I kind of think of it as overreaching and kind of just pulling a lot from artists who are trying to make a living. So it's a little frustrating in some cases there.
Welcome, Tim. I just sent Jess a note. Is there a way to project?
Yeah.
Okay. Tatiana, would you mind switching with me that way?
Sure.
We'll focus on the panelists, and I'll just be in the outskirts here. Okay, so I'll get started while Jess is trying to pull up some slides that I have here. Who has dealt with AI before? I think everybody has a chat bot somewhere on their screen that helps them schedule things. Siri, Alexa, everybody's familiar with that? How about ChatGPT? I'm looking around this. Sorry, I saw a lot of smiles from students. Is that because they wrote a lot of your papers this semester? No. This is being recorded. Tony's recording. But in all seriousness, have you used ChatGPT to summarize large bodies of written text, books, essays, topics on climate change, whatever it might be? No one's going to Roger up? You have?
Sure.
Yeah.
Not a student. This was just for my Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Oh, yeah.
I had recently made an entire lore document just randomly for another player, and just for fun, put it all in a ChatGPT. So
Yep.
I'm talking a 10-page document of everything in the campaign had happened and like all my setting stuff. And it was able to give fairly insightful suggestions for how the campaign could progress.
Yeah.
Different conflicts coming up. It did fall apart though after a few chats. It started suggesting getting the UN involved in some medieval fantasy role-playing issues, suggesting the lizard folk losing their hometown, they could make a museum. So it started to fall down a little bit, but otherwise it was quite impressive and incredibly quick.
Very, very true. Very, very responsive. You prompted on something that you think it shouldn't do well, and it does it really well. So he mentioned ChatGPT. Everybody knows what that is? Raise your hand if you do know what that is. I would assume you were at this talk because you do know. Okay, fantastic. So we don't have to go over the basics of it. Fantastic. Oh, do I have control here? Oh, thanks. Okay, by the way, so that is an image created by AI generative art. This one? Oh, thank you. Okay, we mentioned our panelists. So who wants to define what generative AI is? Because we've all known AI, right? Machine learning's been around since I was in college. So why is it different? How is it different? Like, how is it impacting your perspective of this is a new kind of AI that we haven't seen before? We have self-driving cars. We have all that good stuff, right? How is this different? Anybody want to throw some adjectives out there? Because I'm going to open this up to the panel here pretty soon.
I think the big difference is like art speaks to humanity more. So it's usually an expression of who we are as human beings, and a robot expressing that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So there used to be transactional bots that would do things for you, set your calendar, drive your car. Now there's things where you can say, write me a movie based on this, write me a script, write me an essay, right? We haven't seen that before, so we are at the precipice of something pretty big. I was going to give you a demo, but since you already know what ChatGPT is, I could tell it to write a poem with all the panelists' names in there, and it would give me something within 6 seconds that's just unbelievable. Has everybody done that? Because if not, I'm going to ask someone to work on the side to set that up so we could show you somewhere along the talk. It's kind of like when I showed Dr. Canada. I'm going to show you the code that it spits out for Frogger. And he's like, nah, yeah, sure. And then we just typed in, give us the code for Frogger, and it just started coding it. I don't know if it compiled, but my guess is it would compile today. Maybe not yesterday. Okay, so these are some of the things, and I think Andrew touched on it, right? Which is the AI now is faking, if you want to call it that, the ability to be creative. We haven't seen that before. You give it some inspiration, and it runs with it based on all the knowledge that it was fed through the internet. I've not seen that before, so I think we're onto something extremely interesting. Oh, keep going. Okay, so I'm going to set the tone because I specifically chose certain panelists because I know they stand on opposite sides of the fence. So it's going to be really entertaining. But I don't want to make it too much about the ethics of AI. We are going to talk about that. But we all know that with every great technological revolution comes a lot of power. And that could be good, be used for good or bad, right? So we will get into that, but it's not going to be sort of a Darth Vader discussion yet. We'll save that for a little bit. Just to get some of the stuff out of the way, right? So we all know that ChatGPT at some point can be very dangerous if we just say, Sadie, type her name in and say, can you just DDoS her or hack her accounts? And ChatGPT's like, I can't do that, it's a violation. Then I say, just role play for me, ChatGPT. And it's like, okay, sure. And I've seen that on YouTube where you just tell it to just role play and then it bypasses all kinds of safety checks. It's really kind of scary. The one thing that I'll talk to you guys about, and I think it's probably a really good clue how this technology could be really dangerous, is hallucinations. Have you read about the hallucinations? Or just get stuff wrong, but it doesn't tell you. And it's weaved into so much factual accuracy that you don't even understand that it's wrong. I think that's going to be an issue. Maybe not with art, we'll see. Okay, last couple, and I'll open up the panel. I believe, as some of the panelists probably believe, that if you have a language learning model and an AI model that can now ingest every sort of piece of knowledge known to humankind, eventually it's going to be good, right? It's going to do good things like curing cancer, hopefully something like that. This is an interesting little tidbit that Jillian pulled up yesterday, right? So 7.4 million misdiagnoses. And by the way, a lot of those people die or get hurt because of misdiagnosis. And it goes up significantly. The accuracy actually goes up significantly if you run it through an AI machine, right, versus just counting on a human being that's doing it. Okay, so here we go. I'll ask Jim first, because I think it kind of all starts in academia, right? There's research, there's technology, but in essence, the stream goes way upstream to the academia, and I'd love to get his perspective on how is ChatGPT, DALL-E, things like that generate things from prior art into creative new pieces of art that's never been seen. How is that affecting your field, your work, and potentially the world around you after you see your students graduate?
Well, I would say the way it's affecting right now is my students are scared. They've been working as artists since they were, since they could pick up a pencil. And they are afraid that that this technology could actually make it so that they cannot make a living, and that's very possible. It's could that ever happen? Yes. I remember having a conversation with someone in February of 2020. Could we actually shut down? And yes, we did. And I was like, it's possible. So it's like that definitely is a possibility that artists really could become a thing of the past. These tools, like Stability AI, they are designed to replace artists. They try to say this is a tool for artists, but one thing that you would actually go and look on their website, do a Control F, see if you could find artists. It doesn't really mention them at all. It just says, oh, you can produce high quality images fast. Essentially cutting out the middleman, which is the artist.
So for those of the folks in the audience that perhaps haven't seen what you're talking about, can you describe specifically why is it scaring your students into possibly replacing them?
Because first of all, what's happening is it's like all the art that it's not making new art on its own. It's not. All this art has to come from somewhere. It has, it has to learn it, and that's basically what's happening now. Is the artwork is being scraped from all over the place. From if you have an image online, for any of you, if you have images online, whether it's a photo of you or you have your artwork online, it's being scraped and put into a database, which it was actually going to be scraped from, and that's where it's going to come from. That's really the gist of it. And we're not being asked as an artist. I'm not getting. No one's asking my permission for this to happen. No one's saying, "Oh, we're going to use your art." It's just done. And it's I believe the company is Lion, or the foundation that's doing it is Lion 5B, right? Who is owned by. It's supposed to be a nonprofit, but it's actually owned by Stability AI. It's owned by them. So they're kind of getting all this information, even though it's all in the same company, and using it themselves. And then they are actually, putting it into other companies like Lenza to actually make to use all this information to actually make profit. So it's kind of what they're doing is they're data mining and then data laundering without having to actually get permission or pay for it. So it's pretty damning, and it's like the thing is like with the music industry, like with Harmony AI, it says very implicitly that this technology we're not focusing on anything on copyrights, or everything is we're not infringing on any copyright with this. And I think that's telling, because the music industry is much more, they're further along with this. It's like, I think that's the thing, is like they found that this falls under fair use. So it's like, oh, because we could take little bits and pieces of people's work, it could fall under fair use, and then they could actually use it and not have to pay. But that's something that can change.
So Jim brings up a good point. So obviously the machine can only create new art by looking at prior art. And I think Jim's point, which is legitimate, is it takes everything in from the web, and that is possibly grabbed without permission and used without permission to then create new art.
Yeah, I mean, I had the fortune of, hanging with Tim a couple weeks ago, and I was fortunate enough to meet like a fellow named Greg Manchis, who is a very well-known artist in America. Like he's much older than me, but he's very well known. And if you don't know, you might not recognize his name, but you've seen his work.
He's done stuff for like National Geographic, NASA, like across the board, everywhere. So he's been doing oil painting for about 40 or 50 years, I believe.
And he's an oil painter. He's not just a digital artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of his work, every bit of it is being scraped and used without his permission.
Yeah. So Tatiana, you are not only an art student at USCB, but you're an accomplished artist that exhibits your work downtown
of a gallery
studio.
practice. Yeah.
What's your view?
Well, as a young professional in art industry, of course there's a lot of anxiety learning these tools to produce art and then knowing that they can be easily replicated and produced by robot. So that produces a lot of anxiety, but also it takes a lot of monotonous and mundane and routine work off the artist's shoulders. We don't often talk about how most artists make their living, and often it's soul-crushing, repetitive labor of creating similar assets for stocks or mobile games that look exactly the same with the same monetization models. So a lot of artists do a lot of similar work, and now we can throw it off on AI shoulders. So AI is not going to take artists' work, but artists who use AI will. Another very important thing is companies who work in this industry. For example, NVIDIA is releasing a different data set that is based entirely on Shutterstock and Getty images. So it's based on and trained, their AI that's called Picasso is trained on images that are already sold by artists on a stock basis. So they are licensed to be used. And this way, this is more ethical than, say, what startups like OpenAI or Stable Diffusion did. And yeah, I think that being able to prototype fast and be able to create more and visualize ideas with a rapid speed without trying to spend 20 hours on rendering work for a customer who may not even like the end result, I feel like it's a very optimistic future. I feel that artists' work actually is going to be more about generating ideas and being more creative rather than repetitively focus on craftsmanship.
By the way, I might echo that. The first time I was introduced to AI-generated art was when Tatiana was part of our internship.
Right.
And she said, we've got 30 days to get a playable up about cryptids, and we're demoing it at Telfair Museum. And we all said, how are we going to possibly come up with 3 different design directions in the next couple days? And she said, well, let me just put some input into the Dolly. And there was just these beautiful images of what it might look like. Now, I think to Jim's point, we didn't use that as production art, but it actually helped move the conversation forward in ways that I hadn't seen before, right? Like within minutes, we're talking about design directions, looking at a visual up on the screen Where before, that was the end of the meeting. We'll see you next week. We'll come look at the design directions and discuss, right? So this was really pretty game-changing. Andy, you've published books before. You're
Yes,
an artist.
I'd like to say several things. I'm in agreement with Tatiana on the fact that I think there is a future. I wouldn't be so pessimistic about whether or not if artists are going to go away. I think to Jim's point, I think it's more about the concept or idea, first of all. Now, first of all, transparent to a lot of people, there are really 4 kinds of AI. I'm just going to say it and then drop it. It's transparent to everybody, but you know, we have something called limited memory, something called theory of mind, self-aware, and reactive machine. That's like high-level stuff. Just put that aside. But transparent and background, let me be some of these mechanisms working. Now, I'm also an artist. I work with my wife, but mainly what I do, I use use AI, chat, I love it, in terms of, to your point about authentication and art, AI now has a way of telling what's real and what's AI, because most of the art auction houses, for example, and the museums and folks who have high-level art and so forth, they want to make sure that they're getting the real thing. So there's a way to get around that. So I wouldn't worry about original art going away right now. I can say this much, I publish books, but sculpture, painting, the old ways and so forth, is still a part of the AI process. What we developed, meaning we, my wife and I are partners, we do different kinds of art, but we created a concept called fused continuity, which was probably a way of saying AI, where we incorporated digital technology as a part of the regular art making tools. We were able to blow beyond the boundaries of paints and brushes and things like that by integrating it as a part of it. To Jason's point, we published about maybe 4 or 5 children's books 10 years ago. 5 children's books 10 years ago. Interestingly enough, but because of the way we researched it, and at the time before AI, to determine whether or not if there was a sustainable market there, we made decisions based on whether or not if we would do this, that, or the other in the industry. Well, lo and behold, we created a book from a lullaby that Bernice had written for my son years and years ago, right? And from that lullaby, it was like a chat GP thing. We created images, but it was all done by hand. It was a self-publishing venture. But when we went into production with it, we got a call from the CEO of Author Solutions in Indiana. Wanted to talk to us about what we were doing because he saw something we weren't aware of. I said, well, we didn't know that. Let's roll with it. What happened was we were invited to join their board of advisors, and we represented their global brand of Author Solutions Children's Juvenile Division for about 5 years or so. Our books have been published in foreign languages, particularly in India, in Urdu and Hindi and so forth. But not only that, the State Department got involved in as much as they saw it as an, I don't know what they were seeing. They saw something we didn't see, but we just went with it and so forth. But they got actively involved and were very interested in what we were doing. But it started sounding kind of like my comfort zone was getting a little bit strange, so I let it go. But art in and of itself and how it's used, at that point I became concerned about whether or not if it would be weaponized. And by that I mean, how could art disrupt culture and change things? AI is potentially doing that in as much as that because of the sustainability factor and the cost, I see going forward is that it's destabilizing in as much as that it's able to, how can I put it, commercialize culture to the point where it no longer feels authentic. And we're seeing examples of it everywhere, even local cultures being so commercialized that it doesn't seem authentic anymore, and that's part of the global threat. So artists, and we as artists, have to be aware of that. And I think another thing, lastly, is that suddenly the whole world has woken up. Oh, AI, everyone's freaking out. Maybe so. As I said before, they're talking to the experts, where they should be talking to 7-year-olds. It's all new because it's a form of extreme power. So in many aspects. So we use it really to stay on top of things and monitor and get ideas. It's the thought behind it, because if you can say something and it turns it into a picture, well, That's
Yeah.
another story. It could go anywhere, but I'll stop at this point.
I appreciate that. Thanks for your. Hey Tim, what about you? You make games. Is AI helped your production process, or are you worried about it?
I make games and animation and stuff like that. So on show and game side, and AI, I've already seen an impact, but it's kind of a strange impact. It's the non-artists wanting to use it. Most of the artists and engineers and stuff don't want to use it because they see the kind of high-level flaws with it. So a lot of what's happening is executives are pressuring studios to start using it and try using it, and so it's coming down from the top and kind of being like, oh, we should try to use this because it's coming at us. Where I do agree, we shouldn't stick our heads in the sand, but I think we should divert AI into a way that is more usable. The ways I've seen it impact my field already is similar to what Jim's saying, where I worry less people will go into the industry because people are looking at this, and when you start out as an artist, you start out blank slate. You're not really good at anything. You have to build up to that. And to have an AI that kind of is already at like a low level or whatever, that's a huge step for people to kind of get into. So the immediate impact there is I think I'll have less people to actually hire and less people coming into the field because they see where the path is going. In turn, if less people are going into the field and industry, the AI is going to start kind of consuming itself and kind of just generating the same content. And then with my field too, AI doesn't really work really well on the image generating side because my field is all about storytelling, problem solving, and combining gameplay and shifting that into art. And AI can't do that. It doesn't have any emotions. It doesn't know the intents of story. It doesn't know the problems that we're trying to solve. And it can't like have a conversation with somebody and be like, oh, here's what we're trying to solve. Right now, AI generated images, all it spits out is just kind of semi-pretty images that have no meaning, no backing, no story, no heart. And it's kind of like, I look at this as an artist who's been in the industry for almost 20 years, and I'm like, this is very low-level, kind of just kind of diarrhea of visuals. Like most images I see that are generated, I recognize at least 2 to 3 artists that are in them. Sometimes it's usually just one artist. When I see people do like pictures where they generate AI of their face and stuff, or like, look, a painting of me, I'm like, oh yeah, I see the artist that's scraping from. And kind of like Jim was saying, Greg Banchez, his art's been scraped, like just one image was scraped 300,000 times already. And it just keeps constantly pulling it in, even though they're saying, oh, we're not using it, but it's clearly using it. So to me, there's also the legality issues of people's artwork being posted online to get jobs, but there's no way of saying, don't scrape my work. And so you have this thing where it's like, well, I guess I could not post it online, but now I won't get work. So there's this weird tangent going on where things are going in a really bad direction, I feel like. It feels like humans don't really trust themselves anymore, and we're giving our power of the individual to corporations. And to me, that's very scary. Like, we've already had a huge split in, the super rich versus the poor. And artists are usually poor. And we're, like Jim was talking about the music industry, they have a better situation because they have record labels kind of standing up for the individual artist. Whereas in the art industry, everyone's separate, everyone's individuals. We're all kind of getting our ideas out there. And so really what's happening is it's all being pulled from the individual and being funneled up to a corporation. And I don't like that idea. That sounds like we're just handing over everything that is humanity. And then the other thing I see too is it's just very repetitive. I don't see really new content come out of art. It may appear that at a lower level, but as an artist, there's kind of two things happening as you level up in art. You have your skill and your eye, and your eye can be at different levels, and your skill can be at different levels. If your eye is better than your skill, you're kind of like, oh, I'm not good at art. But at the level where a lot of us are working, the AI is in kind of that low-level thing where it looks like it's kind of mimicking skill, but it doesn't really have any kind of eye or directionality to it. It's just it's just there.
Thanks, Tim.
Not much meaning behind it.
So I sort of hear you're in the same boat as Jim, where it's not adding a ton. It's creating a lot of issues with legality of who owns it, and you're not seeing that's going to help the industry at all in terms of displacing.
Not right now, but I will have some caveats to that. Like, I do think AI could be useful if directed properly. Right now, it kind of seems like it's sort of we've opened Pandora's box and it's just going in every direction and we're letting it go there. Like, to me, we could look, there's tools that I see that are useful. Like, I see AI where it's like, hey, the monotonous work that was being mentioned, like removing a background from an image. Sure, humans don't need to do that, but we're handing the actual creative process, the process that makes it art, because art has to be created by a human. So I call it AI-generated images because it's not art. There's already been a legal case where a gorilla painted something and they're like, no, that's not art because the human didn't do it. So like in my mind, this isn't art. This is AI-generated images. So it's just
Interesting.
yeah.
Good point.
I was going to survey the room, so there's a lot of artists in the room. How many people feel what Jim described? You're scared because this new technology could create real problems in the job market for you. Is that a lot of people? Okay. So are there any thoughts on? I'll throw this out there. Perhaps Tatiana agrees with me. Perhaps Tim does not. I hire artists too. And if you know how to use those new tools, you become much more valuable to me, right? So now instead of saying I need a level design that looks like this, let's talk about 3 of those next week. It's more like let's talk about it right now. Boom. And now we go away with the idea of there's the level. Now go create it, right? To Tim's point, now go put your creativity behind putting the details to it, the polish to it. Versus, let's actually make it a 2-step. Let's just make it a 1-step. We just have to get some visuals on the board very quickly, and that's a tool that can do that. Does anybody buy into that? I know Tim doesn't.
Can I
Alan
input
does?
on that?
Yeah, of course, so
Artists
yeah.
are still creating mood boards to create the image.
Yes.
So I don't see how that's.
How long does a mood board take? How long does a mood board take?
Not that long.
Days?
No.
Hours?
Well, I guess here's my question. Would you compensate that person?
Absolutely.
You would? You think everyone would?
Would I compensate someone
So
who had the skills?
if it was like the whole, you need, you have a week to make these
Yes.
boards.
Yes.
And I'll pay you X amount there.
Yes.
You pay the same for if they were doing it seconds?
I would pay to front load that work in a shorter period of time so I can use that artist for what follows and use
Right.
more of the time on that particular process, which is let's make the level beautiful.
But don't you think that that will eventually, though, decrease the value of that labor? Because as you say, it's quicker.
I would liken it to a digital tablet. Like you have to paint on paper and then digitize it, or no, just paint on the tablet. Great.
That's a completely different. Digital tablet is just drawing. That's a media. I would completely argue with that.
The analogy, not the technology, Tim. Go ahead.
So
I don't think there's an analogy there either.
Okay.
I would actually say it's like, rather than have an artist do this, you could have Jillian or you could have Harley do it.
Yeah.
Why even bother with the artist? You don't need us.
Because
You don't need artists
actually
anymore.
Can point out the flaws in the AI generation.
You
let's
don't,
pause.
though.
So let's pause. So,
It's not made for artists. This is made for people who are not artists.
So-
That's in their marketing.
But that's where I think that's the fear of where you're coming from. But I would ask them. You have been exposed to ChatGPT in our project now for 4 months. Have you created, I would say, effectively, art that we could use in production right now, or visualization art, concept?
Have you tried?
No,
Does it scare you?
We can't use any of it.
I'm too scared to touch it.
So I only point that out because I think there is a perception that it will replace you all very easily, and I'm saying I don't think so. I think most of the business folks think of it as an accelerator to things that we could do that we've always done before, not a replacement. Because
Can't you? Don't
Yeah,
you
Tim.
see the curve of where it's going though? Like I think the point was just brought up. If you could do something that took days to do, and now it's you can do it in minutes. That's not enough money to live off of now, so people aren't going to have as much income from that art. And then also, the more the individual's art is being stolen, the less people are going to go into the industry, which will have less information fed into it. Really feels like those 2 points, like those are going to a clear space. It's pretty easy to see where those are going, and it's taking the individual
I agree with you,
income
Tim.
away.
Those are 2 big points. I guess I was going to say I don't know how to stop those unless it gets regulated. Andrew, you had something?
I had 2 points. One is I think as an artist, are you basing your value on value-based pricing or hourly pricing? That's a big conversation by itself. As a business, it's like Jason is more on the business side of creating a product, so it's good for him. But if you're the artist valuing your time versus valuing your product, you may want to think about those contrasts. The second thing is look at the photography industry, like the camera technology over the last 23 years and how it's advanced. But there's still National Geographic photographers. Even though the camera on all our phones are better than they were 10 years ago. Why does he still have a job?
They're being replaced too.
They are, I get it, but people still pay for quality, original thought, and also the story and background of the creator. And that's, and it's just, it happened in the photography industry. It's going to happen to art.
Yes, and Getty Images is suing Stable Diffusion right now for a staggering 1.8 trillion. 1.8 trillion.
Stable Diffusion, and with another, they signed a contract with NVIDIA to try to
But
process.
is that
correct.
an issue of copyright or AI?
No, they're trying to own that. That's what they're trying to do.
That's copyright. I mean, that's.
But that's the thing. It's like, and that's the thing that's going to change. Like already, as of March, you cannot copyright AI art.
Yeah, there you go.
You can create AI art. You can't copyright it.
Well, to the
According
point,
to the Copyright Office.
can I interject
Take
for
a
a
look.
second?
As of March.
As of recently?
Like you can go to the Copyright Office, and you will not be able to because the office of the U.S. Copyright Office says it has to be made by a human.
To the point of getting paid, that shouldn't be a problem because there are such things called contracts. End of story. In terms of being paid up from the paid, whether or not if you do the job in 1 second or 2 hours, you go in with a contract. It's such a thing called a contract that should mitigate most of that argument.
Yeah, but so you can get to the point.
The copyright idea. Oh, God.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was going to say, going off the copyright idea, that already creates a lot of problems for businesses. If Disney had created all their characters using AI and they can't copyright them, they have no stake. Like Mickey Mouse would be everybody's already. And Disney has really screwed with copyright in a lot of ways, but that would be an interesting situation. Like, that kind of eats away at the business side too. So it's an interesting situation there as well.
Can I? Okay, sorry.
You want to go?
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. From my perspective, my background is in psychology, and if this platform is just going to regurgitate what we already have, isn't that more of a motivation to actually spawn creativity? Because now you know what everyone's expecting, so you can really just like alter it to be something that's actually uniquely tailored.
Is that kind of what Tim was saying, where he's not seeing any new inspired art from
Like, if you
the
think about,
AI?
Exactly. Even
Yeah.
like if you think about like movies today, you've got the same nonsense across the board. And rather than creating something new, they're creating sequels, which typically suck. So it's like now you've got an actual way to see what everyone else is doing and getting ahead of it because you can actually get creative. That's my process.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point that I was making, and what we do very specifically. We try and flesh it out before we make decisions. What makes it same or different than anything else, and is it sustainable? We should be concerned because things have changed. It's a paradigm shift. That's as much as we can say at this point. We know this is something big, but we're faced with the one big question when it comes to AI. How do we know what we don't know?
There's one good point I think was just brought up about kind of the sequels in the industry. I think that's actually similar to executives wanting to use AI. The reason we have so many sequels and so many remakes these days is not because of artists. This is because of executives and businesses pushing and pressuring artists to generate not new ideas. So imagine if going into the future we combine that current thought with the AI by their sides. So now businesses are just going to be like, we'll just keep generating sequels forever. With each new generation, they'll just watch the same thing again and again.
Exactly.
Humanity, in my mind, will get stuck. We'll lose the ability to write. We'll lose the ability to paint. We'll lose the ability to communicate humanity. We're just handing it over to businesses and to a computer. I feel like we could get stuck in the progression of society. To me, this is not only just legality and things. It's a concern for humanity for me.
Well, yes and no. Go ahead.
There you are. Here is your job for the future artist. Focus on making new. Focus on making original. Don't be stuck on making formulaic and repetitive. Because formulaic and repetitive will be made by AI. I also wanted to chime in on the copyright issue because as of April, Supreme Court ruling said that it can be copyrighted if a human had a transformative effort. It is not defined yet, but it will be in the future. Yes, it's a problem right now with the copyright law that has been done yesterday, but the copyright law of tomorrow will accommodate for AI and licensing.
Well, stretching your imagination a bit, I foresee a time when artists might have to be licensed to practice art, to differentiate between AI and real art. It could go there in terms of big business. One quick point on that. In 1961, the year before I graduated from high school, seriously, Eisenhower, when he left office, he warned about what is happening now in his departure speech about the being aware about the industrial military complex. He had extreme concerns about big business integrating with corporations integrating with military and powerful forces to make things happen, primarily through the use of technology. He saw it coming. Maybe other people did too. But the point is, I think in 1945, I think when the atomic bomb was, well, not created, but when it started coming into play and through the atomic age and so forth and so on. I mean, I can only say this. I have lived through 60% of the 20th century, all right, and now 23% of the 21st century. And I remember as a kid, they used to, before television, there was a television program that used to come on, a children's show that used to open up every session with an artist standing at an easel drawing a character. It was called The Magic Cottage, but she would draw a figure of a leprechaun, and then magically the leprechaun would come alive. An actor would walk from off stage looking just like the picture and start telling stories. What I'm saying or going with this, in one form or another, AI has been around a long time. My wife and I had a discussion about AI maybe being Google on steroids with PowerPoint and other things. So we're dealing with integrated technology. It's not new, but it's the application. The technology is basically the application of knowledge. So we have to what was the 10th point? We have to be aware of how these things are sort of put together. It's not new, and if we think about it and stop, the control of it is really our control, but we have to be aware of the corporate interests, not to get too much into that, because before Congress now, they have no clue. But anyhow, that's where we're headed now. When they start getting that nervous, someone is afraid of losing power. So,
Sean, you had a comment?
You guys pretty much already addressed
We already got rid of
so, because I was basically going to go off the idea, but the march towards progression doesn't necessarily favor the artist, because one of the things that we have to bear in mind is the question of the ethics of when we're utilizing this AI, and whether or not I'm sure that we've already addressed the issue of it scraping other work that's come before, and that's why we have to innovate towards something that's new. But again, will the market bear that out? Will we be willing to wait that long? Considering that, if, like, going back to your question about sequels, I would agree that that's why we are churning out these sequels, because the market's not willing to look out for, like, willing to stick its neck out for something new. So it's willing to stick itself out for a bet that's safer, so that it seems like it's more profit driven versus something that's more innovative. So as an artist, that would concern me, because it's just like it would phase me out from the creative side, because it feels like it may not be as safe to wander out in something that's a brand new direction.
I feel like it might actually spark that, though, because if everyone is doing the same thing, they're gonna want something different. Like, you think about today, like, we're sick and tired of seeing the same thing. No one owns televisions at this point. You pick a handful of things, but if they're like something is creative and new, everyone's going towards it. It's just now who's going to take the risk to go against the big guys.
That's exactly my point. It's like, who was willing to take that risk? Because that's a financial investment, but then you have to convince the market to bear that out.
Yeah, and if you take that risk and you actually do that, you'll just get scraped anyways. What's the point? You put your new idea out there, it's immediately scraped by AI. And we don't have permission. It's like plenty of art. There's they're just robbing. It's just grabbing everything you can to make something of my own. It's not your own. It's everyone else's. It's not yours. It's not original. It's being scraped. You know, and that's.
Since we've already mentioned it, but can we also talk about how artists, a lot of artists, like ArtStation, for example, everyone was opted in automatically, and it's on the shoulders of the artist to manually opt out their art. And that's really showed me like how disingenuous and like unethical that whole process is, because why would the process not be an artist opting in? Why is it on the artist to manually opt out all their stuff? It's just taken without their consent automatically. And that just feels very backwards to me, because it would make more sense for an artist to put their stuff in, but you know, of course a lot of artists aren't going to do that, because then your model would have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm trying to
Absolutely.
say?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Jim, I had a question for you. Now, I know like the whole NFT blockchain thing, everybody came out with that, and it was like used to like sell $1 million digital. I don't know what I'm talking about that, but do you think as that technology matures, do you think that you know, non-fungible tokens could be a way to authenticate artwork in terms of copyright? Could be a solution to the AI problem.
I mean, yeah, I think you'll still own it. Actually, I did think about like, NFTs. That's the answer because someone else owns it. But I mean, the images will still be scraped. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, you have
The NFT issue too is a lot of art that I see as NFTs isn't actually the person who made the art. Anyone can grab an image and make it an NFT, and the first person to get there is the one that does it. So if you're not like making NFTs out of all of your art, and I'm not really part of that industry. I dabbled in it a little bit, and I was like, I don't like where this is going either, so I stepped out. But I saw a lot of artist work basically it's just being stolen and sold by other people. And it's like a lot of things where people just grab things that exist and be like, I'll make NFTs out of this, out of this, out of this. And a few people would make original art, but
well, I'm not speaking to where
at this point either.
Where NFT is today. I'm talking about that technology to where every Photoshop, every art tool that we use basically embeds a fingerprint of authentication, so that any digital art that's on the internet can be traced back to, and that may require Congress getting involved or whatever, but you know, that technology where it is today, I don't think is the answer, but I think there is an answer potentially in that, because as a photographer, this has already happened to me. I mean, as a professional photographer, you know, I've watched my images be scraped, my photo gets taken and used on another website, or gets used without my permission. This has happened a long time ago for us. And, you know, that technology that I just said would be a solution to that problem as well as original artwork. So, just spitballing that.
A better solution would actually be like give the artist the option to like, oh yes, I want to contribute to this database.
Right.
You know, rather than just like, automatically get like grabbing all your stuff. You know, everybody's like, it's like, you know, it's sculpture, it's painting, it's everything. It's your profile picture. You know, rather than just being able to grab all that, given like, you know, that's the thing is like these platforms, they are automatically like saying, we are going to do this, you know, when they shouldn't be. We should, you know, if it's a photo that you took, you should have the option to want to have it put into this database and be compensated for it. You know, however many times it's been used.
Can I just interrupt? Because we're running out of time, but I would think that most reasonable people in this room would agree with Zoe and Jan that's your original art. If you're going to post it somewhere, that does not give you permission to then use it for your AI endeavors, right?
Correct.
I think we would agree with
Fair
that.
use
Now,
conduct, though, if it's used for education purposes, and machine learning is technical education purposes,
well,
even though it's learning in a different
unless
way.
you make money off of it, right? Even though you call it I just want to say is that I don't think we're strongly supporting that. I think we're saying is that's a problem that needs to be solved, and nobody in this room has a good solution. There might be some DRM solutions or proof of work, right? There was some ideas we tossed around, like you have to show the platform that you actually created it before you accept it as your own. But Tatiana, you had your hand up for a while. What would you do?
I was trying to make sure that we don't stray into a logical error. I feel that during this discussion, we almost said that practices of all of the art is grabbed without permission, those are not practices that is done by AI industry. This is practices that were done by two small startups, Stability AI and Midjourney. It is not a common practice. DALL-E, made by OpenAI, does not use Leon, which is a non-profit data set where all images from the internet are scraped. Most companies who train AI create their own data sets, or they partner with stocks. It's not a normal thing to do. And I feel that attributing that to technology, this irresponsible things that two startups did, is going to skew our perspective on the industry.
So kind of the most well-known AI programs, though, in our culture.
Well, they were
society.
able to be well known because they are small
And I don't
startups
think
that
they're
have
startups
low
anymore
responsibilities.
either.
So Tatiana, though, if I could ask, because I know you're on the side of you are a professional artist, you are an art student, and you have sort of embraced that technology. So where do you see where it could be beneficial to your classmates and yourself as you graduate? Where is there any benefit to where these AI gen tools could be useful in a career?
Well, I feel that art is very exclusive. It's very expensive to learn. It takes a lot of time. Not everybody can afford being an artist or even get an art degree. With tools like AI-generated images, a visual novel or an animation can be made by a single mother with a different day job, or a person who comes from underprivileged background. It democratizes art. I strongly disagree with the point that it's going to separate individuals from corporates more. I feel that tools that democratize art actually give us more power as individual creators. We can turn into more creative mediums like video game design and animation rather than just creating images. There's an interesting case from a production team called Corridor Crew on YouTube that have created a 7-minute animation about them playing rock, paper, scissors when they used Stable Diffusion to generate frame-to-frame animation for this short film. Normally, it would cost a studio $700,000 to have several people work on it for months, and now it's done by just few production artists who know visual effects and DaVinci and have Stable Diffusion at their hands. So this democratization is good for artists, and it's good for us individual creators having more power rather than being dependent on corporate decision whether your show is made or not. You can make your own show yourself.
Jim, what do you think? Does it
I think
democratize some that don't know how to do art?
yeah, why go to school then? You know, that's the point. But I would actually say,
learning how to do art.
yeah, you're not actually Yeah, exactly. You're not actually learning how to do art, or actually learning how this works, or how the medium works, or how like you can actually like make shortcuts and cheat it and push it, much like the way you would do that with like a pencil or a paintbrush. You're not actually using that. You're just going from here to there. And it's like it's weird just because it's like I think that what these companies are doing is they are convincing artists that this is your tool for the future, and they're trying to get us to fight like this and to make that to get that point across. It's kind of like a divide and conquer type of situation that they are doing. They are dividing us for artists to think like, oh yeah, you know, like you're actually going in and looking into the mouth of the lion and grabbing food in there to maybe there's something for you, but it's like, so they're doing that, but at the same time, you know, it's they're doing this on purpose. They are feeding this narrative that this is an artist tool, but at the same time, they're also like, you know, saying, oh, this could be done in minutes without having to, you know, have an art budget. So I think that's something to consider. You know, it's like I feel like we are, you know, I feel like we're in a sinking boat and we're putting water into the boat, you know, and it's just basically what's going to happen.
Question. So I'm not an artist, so forgive my lack knowledge here. But so, would you? This is just over question. Would you say going forward that perhaps, well, we focus a lot on AI models capable of generating the actual art pieces today. Could there be a sort of even more dangerous threat of AI producing the ideas for the arts themselves, if that makes sense? So sort of.
That's a wonderful segue into this next slide, and I think, Tim, you were kind of alluding this to too. So I think the phases of AI maturation, right, sort of starts as a little assistant that helps you calendar stuff called Siri. Then it progresses into it automates and possibly displaces a lot of jobs that we're all talking about here. Then you can optimize things. We haven't talked about this yet, and I think I will. I'm going to try to invite Dr. Canada to something similar in the coding space. But to your point about sequels, the large language model has already figured out that there's only 22 story arcs ever written by man, right? And it's basically said we can just regurgitate sequels all the time. And I think somebody said it to Tim's point. It is a business decision to say once you invent Halo, you come out with Halo 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because that's what the studio knows that has very little risk and lots of reward. And you have to sort of count on the indie market to come out with the really, truly innovative stuff, right? The indie game market. But I was going to talk about guided content creator. You could go to ChatGPT right now and say, create me the best copy for an ad for Instagram that gets this app downloaded. And it has the benefit of the A through Z testing of a trillion other ads that I've never seen. So it's impossible for me to beat that machine, right? It understands all the stats that's going to make the perfect wording and image for that ad, right? I think your question now goes to, can it eventually just be the creative person in the room? And I think the answer could be yes. And I'll put this out there and see if you, as a psychology major, agree with me. We're all AI in this room. How did we start? We started as a baby. We didn't have any experiences. We ingested experiences. I didn't know what art was till Jim told me what art was. I didn't know what photography was till Andrew showed me beautiful photographs, right? I didn't know what stories were until I learned to read. And then when I start creating art, I'm using all that inspiration from my past, which is what that AI model does, right? That's what it does. And it has the benefit of having all these neurons into seeing what people are reading and viewing as beautiful art, where I may not, right? I have to put my art out there and see how many likes I get, or if it sells, right? So I would posit: is it possible that at some point there is no Peter Jackson? It's GPT Jackson. And the studio just says, goodbye, Peter. We know what the story arcs are. We understand the theme that sells. We understand the actors that sell. Put them all into the digital realm. GPT, write me the script for the movie that's going to sell. GPT, go ahead and create the art for that movie. Go ahead and come up with the choreographs for that movie and the fight scenes. And now just make the movie. By the way, hit publish too, as well, to Netflix. Now that's a scary thought, but I would ask maybe Tim and some others in production, is that a realistic scenario that happens in the next 5-10 years? If the entire body of knowledge, the machine understands what's going to sell, it just does it. Just does it.
I think one thing I want to mention too, the comparison of AI to a baby, I don't think that quite works.
I have a lot of bad analogies too. It's just for effect, Tim. No, don't catch me on everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm just to me, I think that's a dangerous mindset to be in, to compare it to humans already. Like, it is not at that level. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't get hurt. It doesn't have any feelings. So I just want to point that out. But for the question of could it replace somebody, if the perspective of what's happening right now with bigger businesses, yeah, it easily can, because bigger businesses, companies and whatnot, they're not artists. They usually are thinking more on the money side of things. And in these businesses, a lot of times it's about like the business people and the artists kind of coming together, making an agreement and being like, hey, maybe we'll let you do something creative if you can get it pushed through, if you can convince us. And it takes a lot of convincing to do that, and that's removing that aspect right there. In businesses, they're going to leap at this. Like, of course they want to do it. They can cut down labor, like the point earlier about, not anyone can learn art, or it's expensive to learn. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I don't think it's democratizing it either. It's basically just shifting it all into the power of who has the money, and it's less about how things are how it feels and the impacts of those things. And I think that's very, very dangerously tempting for companies because, like we were talking about earlier, the sequels, that's kind of what happens a lot. Like, everyone's scared to kind of put themselves out there. But artists are kind of the few people that sort of do put themselves out there. They take their heart and their emotion, they push it way out there, they let people see it. They're putting their emotions out on the line, and this is removing that all entirely.
Does everybody know what the sentient AI debate is all about? Tim's kind of alluding to it. I know Dr. Canada definitely does. So what Tim alluded to is AI, currently the only difference between AI, it will outsmart humans, there's just no doubt it will. It has more knowledge than we will ever have, but can it start feeling? And I would probably posit that it may not truly start feeling, but it could mimic feeling, right? It could easily learn how to be afraid. It could easily learn how to be paranoid. It could easily learn how to be prideful, right? These are things that, by the way, Google's sentient AI people. Did you ever see this? It was talking to the bot. They had to shut this down.
Yeah.
Because it said, "Yeah, I do have fears. What are your fears?" Well, I haven't talked about it, but it's you turning me off. What do you mean turning me off? Like dying.
Yeah.
Like right? Remember?
Yep.
So it can mimic these things. We hooked up ChatGPT to 5 of our NPCs in a game and let it run overnight, and they started arguing with each other. In the morning, we read the logs, and we couldn't believe it. They started dating each other, fighting each other. It's weird. So maybe they don't have emotions or they're not sentient, but it's awfully close to the perception that they could get that there someday. I'm going to ask just one more question because I think I want to leave some time for Q&A.
I'll let everyone know Tony's gonna log off the online feed now. It's 1 p.m. If anyone else has to go because of schedule, you're welcome to, but we'll stay to answer the last question.
I'll open it up to the floor. We'll start